Some years ago, my parents decided to take a European vacation. They were going to go to Germany and rent a car and then travel around some the sites in different cities, and I'm not sure exactly what their itinerary was for that. It turned out to be not such a great idea for them to do that. Number one, my father was a funeral director all of his life, and he always drove a car as if he were in a funeral procession. Everybody else was supposed to stop for him, and the red lights were supposed to change or whatever was happening. So it wasn't so great about that part. Plus, as you drive around in a foreign country in foreign language, for some reason all the signs are in a foreign language. The signs on the roads all were in German, and they didn't speak any German. They didn't know anything about that. Of course, this was the time before the GPSs and that would guide you to where you needed to go, so they had to rely on maps and being able to read the signs, which they were impossible to do, and they were really kind of frantic. They weren't the kind of people to take a carefree vacation and just see where the road takes them. Fortunately, they landed on the Rhine River cruise, and they just abandoned that car. I hope they turned it in at some point. But they jumped on that boat and had a great time going down the Rhine River. Anybody's ever driven in a foreign country, I find it one of those really scary experiences. It's bad enough that you can't read the signs oftentimes. It's also that every country seems to have its own set of customs about how things are, how driving habits are. So that can be a little confusing. If you've driven in Italy, you stop at a red light in Italy and stay there until the light changes. They know you're a foreigner. Nobody in Italy does that. They all just, okay, the red light's red, nobody's here, soon they go. Only the foreigners wait till the very end. So there's lots of things like that that, leaves you kind of frantic. You don't know exactly how things are supposed to go. You have to be able to read the signs and read the people, the written signs and the unwritten signs about what's going on. Well, Jesus talks about signs in the gospel today, and he says that there are signs that should accompany the work of the believers, and they're very dramatic signs that he lays out there, that you will lay hands on the sick, you'll drive out demons, drink deadly poisons, speak entirely new languages, all these very dramatic things. And of course, they are in some ways things that Jesus himself did in his earthly ministry. He certainly laid hands on many who were sick and cured many people who were beyond any kind of medical help. He drove out demons. The other things are not so obvious, drinking poisons or the snake handling, speaking new languages. It's interesting that one of the first things that happens after the gift of the Holy Spirit is that the disciples go out and preach to the people, and they make a reference to that everybody heard them in their own language, and some have said this is both the gift of tongues, speaking a different language, or the gift of hearing, so that people are hearing the good news in their own language. Whatever it may be, it's a fulfillment of that prophecy that Jesus gives here at the conclusion of the Gospel of Mark. But if we look at it at a very physical, material way, those signs are not very often present in the work of the church. We still lay hands on the people who are sick, and occasionally people do recover, and even miraculously they will attribute that. I've heard them say, when you prayed for me, I just knew I was going to be better. Or they attribute the prayer really of other friends and people, that prayer has been the thing that saved them. But even there, and we could certainly say people that die who have been prayed for and go to heaven, isn't that the ultimate recovery that somebody would have? What further recovery could we want for in our life? But the other signs, not so much. We don't see that happening very often. Of course, as Catholics, we take this evidence not as something that is spoken about on a material or physical level, but obviously much more important at the spiritual level. That what it is speaking about is the power of Christ to overcome evil within our world. This is what Jesus is speaking about. Whatever evil exists out there, it is not going to overcome, will not suppress the power of Christ operating in the world. The biblical perspective of life and of the world is that the world was dominated by the evil one, that the world is dominated by evil itself, and that there's lots of signs of evil's possession of people, sickness. Sickness itself wasn't just a natural event that happened in people's life, explainable by what we know today, scientific reasons of germs or viruses and that sort of thing. Instead, it was somehow the power of the evil one that was entering into the world. Serpents that were always hidden and dangerous, and you don't see them coming. These are signs, symbols, I think, of evil that exist within the world. And even the Tower of Babel that broke apart human community and communication being so closely related there. This Tower of Babel that still stands over the human community and leaves us separated from one another, unable to reunite ourselves. That tower is still there. So lots of signs of the presence of evil that we can read pretty clearly. It's our Christian perspective too that the world has been under the power of evil. But our faith is that by Jesus' death and his resurrection, as we celebrate today, his ascension to the Father, where humanity is at the right hand of God, that evil no longer is the dominant power within the world. That Christ by his death has overcome the power of death, and all those that believe in him have overcome that power as well. But still, do we really see that? Is there evidence of the power of Christ? Is there evidence of those, the demons being driven out at the spiritual level, the sickness cured, the venomous things that we swallow within our life? Is there evidence that those things have been overcome as well? Well, I think every time a Christian is a person of hope and brings hope into any situation, that is bringing the power of Christ into our world. Every time we choose to do the right thing, no matter what the consequences, this is the power of Christ operating within the world. When the world says to us, this is a bad idea, don't do that, it's going to cost you, you're going to fail, and yet we do it because we are believers, that to me is the power of Christ operating in our world. And it's evident in lots of maybe seemingly small and insignificant ways within our life, and we could create a long list of things. But what about the couple that chooses to forgive one another again and again for whatever failures that they have? They make a choice to forgive. That's the power of Christ, I think, evident in the world. Families that reconcile with one another, parishes that work to reconcile with one another, whatever divisions may exist, they place the priority of unity above everything else. We see people who return to the faith, sometimes after being gone for many, many years, and abandon their faith and seemingly as if there were no God, living their life as if there were no God. Suddenly they feel drawn and called back to live out their life. This, I think, is the power of Christ operating in our world. People enter into our church every year, despite the terrible press that we have. Sometimes that press is very well deserved. I don't blame the press, but sometimes it's not always fair, or certainly presents a very negative view of the church, and yet people still say, I think there's something present there. I think there's something that is good there. I think the power of Christ is really operating within that community of people. And they enter into the faith and become exemplary members so often. And so many other ways we welcome foreigners into the church when it's not easy to do so. Our parish certainly is a great example of that, that whatever language separation, we hear the greater language, the call of the gospel and the words of God's love and hope and faith for all people. Christians face evil every day, and we persevere to live out our faith, bringing the presence of Christ to others. And even when we fail, we know that we come back to Christ because of the power of Christ over evil. Many signs of evil in our world. We can read those signs. We see the power of evil within our own personal life, in our communities, in the greater world. And sometimes it seems like a hopeless place. But we believe in the power of Christ. We believe his power has overcome the evil of the world, and that nothing can ultimately defeat the power of Christ.